Hey. Hello. And record. Hello, hello, hello. Tonight we have a guest, but first, here's the news. First part of the news is my hair looks awful. Anyway, if the Republicans win the House of Representatives in 2022, the next Speaker of the House could be, wait for it, Donald Trump. Speaking of the House, Nancy Pelosi decided that two of the members that were appointed by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy in order to determine what occurred on January 6th and why, in terms of the insurrection at the Capitol, she decided they should not be on that committee because, in part, they had voted against certifying the election that they were there to certify. Kevin McCarthy then decided he was taking his ball home and wasn't going to play at all. A new survey has now ranked Arizona as the worst place in America to live. This show is coming to you now from what may be the worst place in America to live. While Texas Democrats left the state to deny a quorum to the Republicans in the Texas legislature in order that they could not impose voting restrictions, they went to Washington to persuade members of the U.S. Senate to vote in favor of two bills that would restrict states from doing that is, from restricting voting rights. So far, there's been no movement. It's called a filibuster. A lot of people have been criticizing Trump unfairly. Yeah, he's not recommending that they take the vaccine, so they aren't. And some of them are getting the Delta variant and are dying. This reduces the number of people who can vote for him and other Republicans. Trump, you're my hero. Maybe there's a reason that Delta is shorthand for change. Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea, good evening and welcome to Speaking of Everything with Jeff Bushman. That's me. Hello and hi. Not necessarily in that order, as our old friend Gary Owens used to say. Tonight, after explaining all of that, and maybe more, our guest will be joining us. That guest is author Luke Murphy. I've interviewed Luke before, and he's bright and very obviously talented and has published a bunch of books now. And he has a new one coming out in 2 days. I think you'll enjoy hearing our live conversation. Of course, it hasn't happened yet, so I can't guarantee it. Speaking of live, however, you can catch all of our shows live on YouTube Live when we create them. In fact, we are on YouTube Live right now as we are recording this in Zoom for our audio podcast, which we will upload later. Of course, if you are listening to our audio podcast, that's redundant, isn't it? If you're listening to our podcast, you know that it's been recorded. If you do want to listen in the future to us while we're live, you can, of course, do that. But you can also watch our YouTube videos, which usually aren't that exciting, frankly. But you can watch them by going to youtube.com and looking for TJBS Radio. And that's where our past recorded videos are, and where this one will be, obviously, after we finish recording it. Because we're available on most podcast sites, I don't know where you're listening, of course, if you're only hearing the audio, but you can hear us at Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and at our own network site, tjbsradio.com. That's actually probably the easiest place if you're just going to listen to audio, because if you look us up on Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or some of the others, sometimes we're a little hard to find. But the name of the show is Speaking of Everything with Jeff Bushman. That's this show. We also have several other shows on our network site, including Fairfax, which is a nostalgic look at growing up in Los Angeles in the 1960s. There's also Fantasy Time, which is a show about fantasy romance novels, co-hosted by two people, neither of whom is me. And that's a, how can I put this? That's an adult-oriented podcast. And you can also see our latest, or hear our latest podcast, which is called Be Healthy, Lose Weight. I would stand up now and show you my flat stomach, but I think for everyone's sake, we'll skip that. But that's a show that talks about avoiding dieting, but being healthy and thinner as a result. I think you'll enjoy that if that's an issue for you. In any event, after that, as I said, we'll be joined by Luke in about 25 minutes, if all goes well, 20 to 25 minutes. Let's talk about some of those things we mentioned. I made the comment that Donald Trump could become Speaker of the House after the 2022 election, more specifically in January of 2023. Here's what's going on in that regard. A conservative talk show host talked to the ex-president and suggested that he run for the House of Representatives, and of course he would be victorious. And once victorious, if the Republican Party has a majority, he could run for and be elected Speaker. However, and he said it was an interesting idea, by the way. He actually does not have to be a member of the House. I know that this will stun people who believe they know how the Constitution works, but actually that's not fair. Obviously, a lot of people do know how the Constitution works, but actually the Speaker of the House can be anyone elected by a majority of the House members. Now, typically what happens, and this will be somewhat familiar to those of you who are in a parliamentary system, such as our friends in Canada or in England, and this show, oddly enough, has been downloaded in several of those countries, several parliamentary countries. But the members of the House, whichever party gets the majority in the House of Representatives, will vote for the Speaker of the House. Normally, that's the head of their own party, of course. So Nancy Pelosi first won an election among Democrats to be the head of the Democratic Party prior, I think, to the election of 2020. And then once the Democrats won that election, they voted for her to be Speaker of the House. Okay. And that's why she began this current term in 2021 when the House was seated, when the Congress was seated. But there is no requirement whatsoever that the Speaker of the House be a member of the House, be an elected member of the House. By the way, something else that surprises a lot of people is the justices of the Supreme Court, and I believe of the lower courts that are appointed on the federal level, but certainly the Supreme Court, there is nothing saying that any of those folks have to be lawyers. They virtually all have been, but not all, particularly at the beginning of the country. Not every, of course, they didn't have the whole law school system set up at the time, but not every justice of the Supreme Court, not every federal judge has been a lawyer. Almost all of them are now, but probably all of them, but I don't know that for a fact. Some of them may seem incapable of being lawyers, but they, in fact, are all lawyers. Although in many cases, by the way, some of them have never tried a case, which is unusual to be a lawyer for enough years to get notice as a possible nominee to the Supreme Court. But many lawyers who are on the Supreme Court, I can't specify because I don't know, but many of them have not been trial lawyers. Okay. In any event, so Trump could theoretically, if the Republicans win a majority of House seats in 2022, he could become Speaker of the House in 2023. Do you need another reason to go to the polls in 2022? Okay. Let's see. I mentioned at the top of the show that Nancy Pelosi, let me explain. First, the Democrats and some Republicans wanted to create a commission to look into, a nonpartisan commission or bipartisan commission, to look into the insurrection of January 6th. As you know, there was supposed to be a vote, which is normally just a formality to certify the elections and the electors from the various states. Just basically certifies the Electoral College vote for president. Some Republicans wanted to not do that, and the rioters came in and prevented the vote from happening at first because it was obvious it was going to win. But when the vote was finally taken, a number of Republicans voted against certifying the election. Well, when the commission was determined by Republicans not to be a good idea, and they didn't want to participate, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, again, decided to create a select committee. Well, she invited the Republican leader to go ahead and nominate Republicans to that committee, and he nominated a number of them, I think it was 5, and of those Republicans, 3 of them, I beg your pardon, 3 of them had voted against certifying the election. So for some reason, Nancy Pelosi chose 2 of those to not permit, that was her right as Speaker, who appointed a select committee or created a select committee, to not approve of any of those members. She vetoed 2 of them, and Kevin McCarthy therefore said, well, we're not going to appoint any members. I'm pulling them all out. So now it will be 5, I believe it's 5, no, it's 8 Democrats and 1 Republican. The 1 Republican who was appointed by Nancy Pelosi was Liz Cheney from Wyoming, who had voted, among other things, had voted in favor of the impeachment of Trump. So it gets interestinger and interestinger, as they say. Also, let's see what we were. So that was the Speaker issue. I'm sorry, that was the issue with respect to the committee. And the other thing is, lately, this is peculiar. By the way, I am watching the clock, and it's as we are taping, as we're recording, it's 12, and live on YouTube, of course, it's 12 minutes after the hour, and we're going to be joined in about 15 minutes, más o menos, as they say. Speaking of Spanish, I have something funny to tell you with respect to the phrase mano a mano. However, I may not remember it, but I may, and I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. Yes, we're going to, as I say, I'm watching the clock for Luke to join us at about 1/2 the hour. In any event, let me just see. If you, the other, I wanted to tell you about a couple of projects we have going on before we're joined by Luke. I wanted to plug a couple of our projects. First, by the way, you can tell we're doing this live, because if we weren't doing it live, a lot of my hems and haws would be taken out. Okay. My recently published book has to do with my so-called regular gig. The book is called You've Been Served. And if you're listening in North America, I expect you don't have to hear what it's about. We tell war stories about process serving, and we also discuss the ethics of the field and a good deal more. It's funny, and I think it's enjoyable. Of course, I wrote it, so I'm a little biased, but you can see that book there. And while you're looking on Amazon.com at that book, there's also a book I've written, which is ebook only. And that book is called The Mobile Millionaire. And that's about the mobile home business. And in any event, that was written some time ago. And oddly, to me, that book sells all over the world. If you're interested in investing in mobile homes, that would be something to look at. Okay. Also, another plug before we get back to the main part of our discussion. If you'd like to reconnect with someone you've lost touch with, take a look at the website we created, findlostfriends.com. And findlostfriends.com is a website, obviously, but it allows you to put in information and get in touch with us to have the opportunity to find someone who's an old friend you have lost contact with, or perhaps an old flame, old boyfriend, old girlfriend. This is a way to do it. Now, instead of the websites that charge you a bunch of money then allow you to do the search, we do the search for you. We're licensed private investigators, and we can do that. And frankly, we give you a partial refund if we can't find them. So it's that's basically it. It's findlostfriends.com. Unlike a lot of commercials you hear on the radio or TV, we're not going to say it 3 times. If you didn't hear it and you're listening to a recording or watching a recording on YouTube, you can go back and play it again. Okay, just one more time, not 3. Findlostfriends.com. Okay, enough said. In any event, one of the things that's been happening, I was going to talk about mano a mano, and then I'll talk about vaccines. There's a commentator who's a very bright guy, very good politics, very good human, very funny, by the name of Mark Shields, and he's on PBS NewsHour frequently, and he's also on a lot of other programs. He's a columnist, I think, his column comes out of the Boston Globe, but I'm not sure. In any event, Mark Shields recently was talking about someone battling mano a mano, and he added, if that doesn't sound too sexist. It becomes obvious that he doesn't speak Spanish, pardon me, that he doesn't speak Spanish. The reason I said that is because mano a mano does not mean man to man. It means hand to hand. Mano is hand. If he wanted to say man to man, it would be hombre a hombre. But it was just amusing when I heard that, when he said that doesn't, mano a mano. Yeah, anyway, for what it's worth. Vaccines. Lately, we are doing this show on July 21st, 2021, if anybody doubts the year. The reason I mention that is because besides the fact that Luke's book becomes available in 2 days, which we'll, I'm sure, mention again when he comes on. But over the last couple of days, all of a sudden, some Fox hosts and and Mitch McConnell, I think, have come out advocating that people get the vaccine. Now, Mitch McConnell was doing that before, to be fair, although not very vociferously, he was doing it. The Fox hosts were, if anything, and there's at least one that still is, the Fox hosts, if anything, have been discouraging use of the vaccine and is continuing to imply that everything is a hoax. Okay. What's his name? Sean Hannity, and there's another host, not Tucker Carlson. He's still doing that. But at least one other host, I can't remember, Doofy? That's not the right name. But one of the other Fox hosts have been recommending that people take the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. No one has said why, but at least one other person has expressed the suspicion, which I share, which is that they have probably done some polling and found out that since the Delta variant has been running around the country making people sick, that Republicans are worried as well, or are thinking that getting the vaccine is a good thing, as a result of which the Fox News hosts are getting the word from on high, hey, we've got to go ahead and recommend the vaccine since our constituency is concerned about it. Okay, so now they're recommending the vaccine. It's way too little, and it's much later than it should be, but we can't say it's too late, because the fact is that the more people who get vaccines, the more protected we all are, and the more protected they are. One of the sad things that was broadcast today was, I think it was on CNN, but it may have been another news network. They said that people who are about to be put on a ventilator, which is not a good thing, okay? The people who are about to be put on a ventilator are requesting of their doctors that they get the vaccine right before they go on the ventilator. One of the reasons they're making that request at that time is because once you're on a ventilator, it's very hard to talk, very hard to communicate. And there are it's not entirely a death sentence, but relatively few people who go on a ventilator ever come off of it until they pull the other plug. So the last question is, okay, please give me the vaccine now. And the doctors are having to tell these people, I'm sorry, it's too late, it won't do any good. Vaccines are not designed to cure, they are designed to prevent, okay? So let me add my urging. Anyone who is listening to this or watching this who hasn't had the vaccine, would you get it, please? And I make that request for two reasons. By the way, I'll tell you what I recommend in terms of vaccines, even though some people won't agree with me, but I do recommend you get the vaccine. And I specifically recommend Johnson & Johnson, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But when you get the vaccine, you are preventing yourself, or very likely preventing yourself, from getting sick enough should you be exposed to the virus. You're preventing yourself from getting seriously sick. You're probably preventing yourself from getting hospitalized, and you're almost definitely preventing yourself from dying, okay? I would recommend, and I'm not a doctor, never played one on TV. In fact, I don't even remember playing doctor when I was a child. But if the recommendation for the Johnson & Johnson is for a very simple reason. First off, all of these 3 vaccines that we're using in this country have been authorized for emergency use, okay? And that's fine, but they haven't gotten full approval. But that's not the reason. The reason is the Johnson & Johnson is the traditional vaccine. If you're old enough to remember when people were lined up for miles for the polio vaccine, either Salk or Sabin, then you're bloody as old as I am, I think. But anyway, but if you remember those vaccines, and of course they still give the polio vaccine, that puts a dead virus in your body, which stimulates the body's immune system, and you don't get the virus. Okay, no, in the United States, virtually nobody gets polio anymore. Okay, and if you get the shots, you don't get mumps, measles, or rubella anymore either. And the Johnson & Johnson is is a vaccine that is similar to that, okay? When you get the other 2 vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, right now in this country, as this is being recorded, we do not get the AstraZeneca, but we have some AstraZeneca vaccines. Pardon me, I'm going to take a drink of my tea. Boy, that's good. Anyway, the AstraZeneca we have in this country, we have it manufactured, or we have manufactured doses of it, but it hasn't been approved even for emergency use. So the other day, the Biden administration announced it's being shipped out to some other countries that are approving it and are putting it in people's arms. So my view of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines is that because they are not the traditional vaccine and they are what they call mRNA vaccines, and I honestly don't remember what the M stands for, but RNA is the building block of our cells, building block of life. And if you're not familiar with RNA, but are familiar with DNA, DNA stands for deoxy, meaning the oxygen is taken out, ribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid is DNA, RNA is obviously with the oxygen. But these are the first vaccines ever that are mRNA vaccines. Now, they unquestionably work to prevent you from getting the disease. The problem is that we don't know what the long-term effects are of giving you a vaccine that affects your RNA. Now, I am not suggesting at all that you don't get a vaccine. You get a vaccine. If you disagree with me, or you do research and you have enough authority that suggests to you that I'm all wet, fine, get what you want in terms of the mRNA. But if you do agree, and or your doctor also feels that way, then, or your research suggests that I'm right, get the Johnson & Johnson. I don't know about the rest of the country. My belief is that in most of the rest of the country, it's pretty easy to get a vaccine now. Here in the Phoenix metropolitan area, I will tell you it's a pain in the butt. We got our vaccines at different times because we wanted the Johnson & Johnson, and some places wouldn't guarantee that you would get that vaccine. You had to sign up for the vaccine, show up and take your chances, which I wasn't about to do. Then the other thing is, once you did it, you had to sign up it's just a pain. I will tell you that when I did it, I had to sign up at CVS because I couldn't really act. Oh, I take it back. I did sign up online, but for my wife, I actually had to go into the store to sign her up. It was crazy. And it was a different CVS because they changed the ones that would give the Johnson & Johnson. The vaccination rate is pretty good in this country, but they have not made it the easiest thing in the world to do from the beginning. And at the beginning, both the state, in this state, the State Department of Health Services and the drug chains made it really tough to sign up for an appointment. There are people who will disagree with me and say, I got my appointment like that, no problem. Well, I'm not afraid of computers at all, and I still found it to be a pain. I would say it's a pain in the neck, but I actually had a lower opinion. Okay, so that's basically that. We talked about we're now just waiting for Luke. It is 26 minutes after the hour, and he should be joining us momentarily, unless there's some kind of screw up somewhere. But let's see what we've got here. No, he's not in yet. The other thing I wanted to talk about while we have a minute is voting. I was just talking to a friend of mine today, and I alluded to the Wisconsin Supreme Court vote a little bit ago, and in which they tried to make it hard for the more liberal people to vote for their Supreme Court justice. Long story, but ultimately they did make it harder to vote. They came out anyway in droves and elected the more liberal justice. It is my hope that people distressed by the effect of these voting restrictions that are being imposed will come out in droves in 2022. Please vote. Help your friends register to vote. We've got to affect the election. Someone who's not concerned about this election because he's Canadian is Luke Murphy. Luke is referred to as an international or best-selling international author or international best-selling author. We're trying to get the video here. I mean, Luke. Luke, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There you go, and I see you.
Yeah, there we go.
How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I look younger than you expected, huh?
Absolutely.
And taller, but I'm sitting down.
Yeah, I guess it's the first time we've actually seen each other.
That's correct.
We've been interacting a lot on social media, on email and stuff, but we've never actually been face to face. So
right, and as you'll remember, we did a couple at least podcast interviews when we were doing earlier series, and but this is the first time we've actually done video. So this is on YouTube as well as, although it's on Zoom, it'll be on our podcast network, which I'll mention again for the audience, tjbsradio.com. And the reason I did, just so you know, is that we are also available on most of the other podcast stations, if you will, Spotify, Stitcher, and all the rest. But we're easier to find on our own network. Anyway, so first off, how are you? How are things? You're in Montreal, right?
Close to Montreal, about 3 hours from Montreal in Quebec. So actually closer to Ottawa. So we're about an hour outside of Ottawa, but on the Quebec side. Things are going well. I mean, as well as can be expected with, these crazy times that are going on. The family's doing well. My wife and I and my oldest daughter, we're all double vaccinated now. So we're, my oldest just got her second one today. It was funny because she was supposed to go on Friday, and I was thinking I'd be standing in line with her on Friday, the day that my book's going to be released. Well, people were reading my book. It would have been funny. So we got her in a little earlier today, so it was good. But Quebec, we were very fortunate to have a lot of in-school learning. So for students, so that was nice.
Wouldn't it have been cool if you'd been in line and people had actually been holding open the book in line, reading it while you were there?
I'm not that popular, so
I understand. But it would have been cool though if you had been.
That would have been really neat. Absolutely, that would have been really neat for sure.
Yeah, neat. So
how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. No, if we had COVID, there were mild cases at the beginning of 20, which I think we both did. But then after that, I mean, in my day-to-day life, I am like really exposed to people. Seriously, I don't mean I do a strip show, but I'm a process server. So I'm walking up to people's doors all day long. And obviously when, the mask mandate was on, I was wearing masks and all that, but you're still exposed. And there were many times before they asked us to wear masks that I didn't. So my not getting it suggested that I was right about having had it, or I'm just one lucky SOB, hard to know. But your book is coming out in 2 days.
It is, yeah. It's very exciting. It's they keep asking, people keep asking me, are you still excited? I'm like, absolutely. It doesn't matter how many books I have out. It's always exciting and a little stressful.
Yeah. So I thought I had written it down, but I did not. What is the name of the new book? Oh, Finders Keepers.
Yes. Right? Yeah, the book's called Finders Keepers. That's right.
Very cool. I want to come back to that because first I want to ask you to share with our audience a little bit more of your background. You were, by the way, one thing I've got to tell you that's funny, your website talks about, I think it's your website, something I saw referred to you as an international bestseller, which I'm sure is true. But one of the things that I found funny is there, for a long time, not anymore, but for a long time, I was in a book club here locally. And one of the members of the club, I'm still a good friend of his, was talking about somebody being an international bestseller. He was from Canada. And I kept saying, yeah, he sold 2 books in the US. He's international bestseller, yeah. But your case is different. But also, before we get into your previous career and your other books, I wanted to ask you a question we've never talked about before, which is, when did you first either realize or determine that you were a writer, that you like to write?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's, people ask me, or people refer to me as an author, and I don't even know if I refer to myself as an author. Like, I don't write full time. It's not a full-time job. I don't make, my living off of my books. There are people who do that. I call them authors. I could be a writer. It's more of a pastime, a hobby for me. I just happen to publish and makes a little bit of money from it, right? Yeah, so I've always been an avid reader. I've loved reading. I grew up with the Hardy Boys mysteries. That might date my age there. But
they were old used books at the time.
Yeah, exactly. From the library. So my mother was a librarian, so that obviously was how I got my love for literature. And yeah, so I was always an avid reader, and mystery thriller genre just seemed to be the genre I enjoyed reading. So it kind of made sense to write in that. So how I got involved in writing, I didn't really enjoy writing as a kid. Going through school, I only wrote because my teachers made me, basically. They forced me to do it. So I guess it was in 2000, I was playing hockey in Oklahoma, and I got injured. And I was out for the season, so I couldn't play all season, and I had a lot of time on my hands. Obviously, I couldn't go to practice or go on road trips or anything with the team. And my wife at the time, she was my girlfriend. She was in university, and she had to write a paper, a short story on any topic at all. And she asked if I'd help her, and I did. And I really enjoyed it, creating characters and plots and settings and stuff. And I really enjoyed that. So once we had done that, I took one of the characters we had created, and I just kind of started dabbling a story down. And next thing I knew, I had a full manuscript done, and I didn't think it was very good. It wasn't. It was actually Kiss and Tell, which was the second book I published. But so I got that done, and I let my sister read it, who is also an avid reader of the genre, and she really liked it. She said, you should do something with this. But I knew that it wasn't good enough, so I said no. So I just kind of wrote for fun every now and then, and eventually I decided in 2004, I said, you know what, I'd like to write with the purpose of publishing. So for me, I don't take anything lightly. Like, anything I do, I want to be the best or as good as I can be. And I take things seriously. So I took the whole year off from writing. I just researched. I researched the industry, publishers, agents, the genre I was interested in, see what readers were interested in, what was expected from readers. And then I started plotting, coming up with the characters I wanted and the plot and the setting and things. And I just did that for a year. I didn't write a word for a year. And then once I had all these notes, then in 2005, I sat down on my computer and I started writing. And that's basically, it was a long process. So it was, 7 years later before that book was published. So, you go through the whole editing phase, and then finding an agent, more editing, finding a publisher, more editing. It was, when you go the traditional route, things go a little slower, but that was my first experience of it. And I haven't really looked back. And I still enjoy writing today.
Well, that's great. Like I say, I got the bug a little younger than you did, but and because of the difference in our ages, it's been a longer haul. But anyway, that's cool. You alluded to, and I was going to ask you about it, even though I know some of the story. You did play professional hockey for 5-6 years.
Yeah, I mean, it was professional hockey because I got paid to play. I never played in the big leagues. It was always in the minor leagues. It was the farm teams for the NHL. The NHL. Yeah, so I played 5, almost parts of 6 years. I kind of, when a guy like me stops playing, you don't call it a retirement. You just kind of call it quitting. You don't hold a press conference and announce it on TV or anything. You just it was a bad year for minor leagues because it was the year of the NHL lockout, and all of those NHL players came down to play in our league. So, a lot of guys lost jobs and things, and the coaches had asked you to take pay cuts so that they could pay these NHL guys who are turning down millions of dollars, coming down to play for hundreds of dollars. And I had to take a pay cut so they could get paid. But so I was almost 30 then, and I said, I'm not gonna be going any higher in hockey. So I know my wife wanted to move back to Canada so she could start her own career, and it was the right time. And I don't have any regrets. I had a lot of fun playing hockey. I met a lot of people. I got to see a lot of North America, and it was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not much of a sports fan. The one sport I like to watch is pro basketball, and I don't do that very often. And of course, by the way, I'm in Phoenix, so you know what happened here last night.
Oh, brother. Well, there weren't any riots, were there?
No, which was frankly kind of a surprise. But or at least there were no. The last time they were in the playoffs, I'm not making fun of anybody, but it was like a religion here. There were the people put banners on their windows and on their car antennas. It was unbelievable, seriously.
Was that back in the Charles Barkley days? Was that way back then? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, he has made various comments over the years about the possibility of running for governor of Alabama. I don't know if
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that was when he was playing, and it was seriously, it was like every place you went, you saw stuff, particularly in downtown Phoenix, near where the stadium is. But anyhow, everywhere. So this time, maybe they knew they were going to lose or something, but the enthusiasm was there among some people, but it was nowhere nearly as widespread. What I was going to say is, I'm not much of a sports fan, and when I think of hockey, I don't think of Oklahoma.
No. I mean, it's funny. Some of the places I played, like I played in Oklahoma City, I played in New Orleans, I played in Macon, Georgia for a couple of years. Wow. I played in all these southern cities that the first thing you don't think of hockey right away when you think of those cities.
No,
for sure.
It's hard to imagine the kids growing up saying, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to play hockey."
But the good thing about doing that is that we were the only professional hockey team in the area. So we got a pretty good drawing, especially in Oklahoma City. Like it was the attendance. It was crazy how they supported hockey there.
That's funny. Yeah, that's weird. Yeah. So after you quit hockey, you created your first character and series. And that was the two characters I know a little about are Charlene Taylor and Calvin
Waters.
Okay.
Waters, yeah.
Yeah. So before you carry the water, tell me about Charlene.
Well, the Charlene Taylor series, there's 3 books in it. So Kiss and Tell and Rockabye Baby, and then Red Zone book 3 is kind of has both Charlene and Calvin in it. So it's kind of like a crossover between my 2 series. So yeah, Charlene was a fun character to create, and it's kind of obvious for me for me to write from a female point of view, because I have a wife, 3 daughters, even my dog is female. So I'm surrounded by females every day of my life. So it kind of made sense for me to write from a female perspective. But to be honest, Charlene is very much of a tomboy. So she does think a lot like a man, so that kind of helps me out a little bit. But I'm often asking my wife, what would you do in this situation? What would you feel or think? And so she's always telling me things. So yeah, I certainly have a lot of help in creating that female character. Yeah, but it is a lot of fun.
And I know that you're a fan of a couple of writers that I like, and I was going to say you perhaps got the crossover idea from Michael Connelly.
Big Michael Connolly fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Harry Bosch and Mickey Haller. I mean, I love his series, and yeah. So certainly, and crime fiction, right? Like police procedural, we're very similar genre.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of his books. I'm definitely a big fan of his. But there've been a few authors who have done the crossover thing that, you know, I thought it really worked well, and I wanted to try it, and I've gotten positive feedback from it. So who knows? Maybe there's another crossover in my future. Who knows?
I have what's going to sound terrible, but is actually designed to but is designed to encourage you.
Okay.
All right. Here's a trivia question for you, but it's not really a test. It's just I told you why. What would you guess is the average number of sales for a book in a bookstore? In other words, I'm eliminating the self-publishing, you know, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So we're not counting about self-publisher.
Well, I think they do, but I think they probably cap the number of sales they do to make the average not, you know, absurd. So let's say you skip the Stephen King's, you know.
So do you mean like per year, or?
Yeah. What would you guess? It's going to surprise you.
It'll be very low, I would imagine. Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I know that ebooks have really taken over too. So that'd really bring down the number. I don't even be able to guess.
You go into a Barnes and Noble, and you see the vast array of books.
Yeah.
Right. And the average book in a bookstore sells 12 copies a year.
I believe that. I was going to say 8, but that was. I believe that for sure.
Well, you know, and I looked that up, and it made me feel great, and I'll tell you why. No, seriously, because one of my books is an ebook only, sells on Amazon. It's a book about mobile home investment. Okay, and my recent book, I'm not really sure what the sales are. That's about process serving, but the one about mobile home investment sells about 14 a year. Now that's not, or maybe a little more.
Wow.
No, I think last year sold 20. Whatever. Now, that's not a lot, but I'm an unknown author.
But you're above the curve.
Yeah, and it's ebook only. It's not selling in a bookstore, and nothing, and very little publicity. I just gave it all the publicity it gets, and so some of that is word of mouth. Some of that is people looking something up, you know. Yeah. And all of that. But the point is, you're obviously selling a lot more than 12 books a year of each one of your novels.
Geez, I should be a New York Times best-selling author in that case.
There you go, babe. That's it. No, but you know what I'm saying, you know, and
I know exactly.
Most people picture when they're, you know, talking about, you know, books in a bookstore, someone got published, for God's sake, and they're selling, you know, and that's one of the things. This is a side note entirely. I hope you have a few minutes. There's something called the long tail. Are you familiar with the concept?
No.
Okay. It used to be that when you're talking about whatever the product is, but we can talk about books. It used to be that when you published a book, it would be on the shelves for a while. Then it would, you know, ultimately stop selling, go to the remainder table, go back to the publisher. You know the routine. But that would be it. And then if I wanted to buy your book, right? This is before the internet, okay? If I wanted to go buy a book, your book, if it was 2-3 years later, certainly 4 years later, I would have real trouble finding it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, you know, I'm not sure this applies necessarily to the formerly published books, but now if someone is like, I wrote the mobile home book, I think 5-6 years ago, maybe, you know, it's got to be more than that. It's still selling. And the reason it's still selling isn't because I'm so brilliant. The reason it's selling is because there's an interest in the subject matter among some people. But if they're looking for it, they can find it because it stays there forever. Okay. That's the concept of the long tail. And the guy who created that was a former editor of Wired, Chris Anderson. But the point is that now people can find stuff they couldn't find before. And so, you know, I don't know if you know how that applies to published books. I mean, because you've been publishing for a while. Any idea?
Yeah, I have no idea. And as a self-published author now, I self-published my last 3 novels. You know, I wouldn't imagine if I drove around even Canada, if I would find any of my books in bookstores. Like, I have no idea if booksellers buy, bring in my book or not to sell, but if you only have a limited amount of shelf space,
Right.
You're not filling it with Luke Murphy novels. I mean, you're filling it with
They
James
might.
Patterson's and John Grisham's and Stephen King's and, books are going to sell. So,
yeah, but yes and no. Especially if they do it on consignment, some independent stores will take a chance.
Yeah.
But the, and if you're self-publishing, did you also publish as ebooks or just hardcover or paperback?
No, paperback, ebook, and audiobook.
Well, the ebook thing, depending on where it is, that may evince that long tail conceptualization.
Yeah, it could too. And really, audiobooks have really started to take off as well now. So I was convinced a couple of years ago by an author friend of mine to get my books into audio format, and it's been nice. Pardon?
They've done well as audiobooks?
I guess, I don't know. I can't compare them to,
That's true.
to anyone else, but I it's extra money in my pocket. So
well, then why not?
No, exactly. Yeah.
I've only listened to one audiobook. That was Barack Obama's book, which I listened to through a number of running sessions. I'm a runner. And, the one thing about audiobooks, as you know, is they are long. Even a relatively short book runs a long time. Which is great if you're doing what I was doing, but for a lot of people, it just doesn't make sense. But again, what you're talking about is you are in business. There's a concept of friction, okay, and you want to make whatever your business is. You want to make your sale or service as smooth as you want to make it as easy as possible for your customer to buy.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
One of the things where they talked about friction that wasn't directly related to business was the creation of the euro as a unit of currency. So there wouldn't be so much friction exchanging francs for, drachma, and so on.
Yeah.
And that has worked overall. But in terms of your books, that's, again, you're doing that without having conceptualized the idea of removing friction. Tell us about how you came up with, I understand about Charlene Taylor. How did you come up with Calvin Waters?
Well, Calvin was, so Dead Man's Hand was the first book that I published. Calvin Waters, when I was living in Oklahoma, I came up with Calvin. Again, it's funny because I have two different series. One character is female and the other is a Black American man, right? And well, I'm not female or a Black American man, but I seem to write from the point of view of both characters. So a lot of people ask me, like, how do you do it? But the character of Calvin came together. I actually had the plot of the story first, and I needed a character that would fit, fit the bill of, no pun intended, of a bill collector. So I
used to do that kind of work.
There you go. So it kind of came together from two movie characters that I'd seen that year. One was the Denzel Washington character in the movie Man on Fire, and the other one was Dwayne Johnson, The Rock's character from the movie The Rundown. So I really liked both of those characters. That kind of blended them together to create Calvin Waters. And Dead Man's Hand, creating Calvin was tricky because I had to create a bad guy who was a good guy in the story, right? So I mean, he's a bad man, does bad things, but he's the good guy in my story. So I had the tough part was creating this character that people would sympathize with, even though he's this bad guy. But I had to create the whole atmosphere, everything surrounding him, as he knows he's made mistakes. He's trying to change his life. He's trying to turn things around. He wants to be a better person. He wants to get out of the life he's in and start something new and better. And so I had to create that whole persona for readers. so that they would sympathize, because you want the readers to, cheer for your protagonist and root for him and want him to succeed. So, that was the challenge. But, according to my readers, a lot of them love Calvin, and they're always asking for a new Calvin Waters novel. So I guess I did something right. But again, that was just kind of mixing characters. I knew I wanted someone with an athletic background, because that was my background. Yeah. And I could write kind of from his psyche of having an injury that ruined his career, because I've had injuries that kind of ruined my seasons and stuff. So I knew what kind of thoughts would be going through his mind, going through all that. So, I guess there's a little bit of me, even though I'm not a 6'5", 240-pound black man. I'm still, there's still some of me in Calvin Waters' character for sure.
Yeah, you could have fooled me. The athlete with the injury who goes into something else now makes me realize why you also showed as one of your favorite authors, Harlan Coben.
Yes, Harlan Coben. Yeah, I really like his characters there, and he turned became an agent.
Right.
So it was and I also like his Wynn character. His Wynn character is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
do anything, just write a check.
Yeah, exactly. That would be nice if we could all do that, right?
Yeah. After we win the lottery, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, Harlan Coben, I've read a lot of his books. I haven't read as many recently, but I really enjoyed his older stuff.
Yeah, me too. I was gonna say, if we're any indication, he's in trouble.
Well, I think he really got into young adult. I know that some of the English teachers at my high school, use his books in their grade 8 curriculum. So he got into the young adult series, but I think he does both. But I know he started focusing on young adult at one point, and that's when that's not my genre. I don't read that. So
well, I will share with you, and I hope Harlan doesn't hear this, which is, let's admit it, unlikely. But one of the things that happened with his books, in my experience, is that it kept being a lot of the same stuff. You knew what I was going to say, I could tell. A lot of the same stuff, where someone goes missing, and the character ends up trying to find him, and they find him, and oh my God, what happened? And it's a lot of that. And the reality is his writing is terrific. The issue for me was the plots were a little bit same.
Yeah, I think. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that I have finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for some authors, I'm not saying Harlan Coben's like this, but for some authors who write full time, I think the pressure there to get books out quickly for readers, whether they're pressured by their agent or publisher or whatever to meet deadlines and things. And I think sometimes you get a lot of the same things. I'm not saying Harlan Coben does that, but I think for some authors, as I said, who are throwing out a lot of books over and over, right? I'm kind of fortunate in that way that I don't have deadlines to hit. Like I'm not rushed to get a book out or anything, even though I have some readers, and they know who they are because they're watching right now, who are pressuring me to get books out. But no, that's one benefit of self-publishing, is you don't have those deadlines to meet and the stress, to get, I have to hit this many words today, or, you don't have that stress. So, and I think some authors just try to, put some books together quickly for their readers.
Yeah. Another example of that, and now we don't have to worry about insulting him because he's dead, was Robin Cook. You ever read anything by Robin Cook?
I've never read any of his stuff. No.
Again, very high quality writing. My wife just read a book by him, an old one, obviously, because he's, dead. But he wrote about, it was almost like the disease of the year, plague, outbreak. They made a couple of movies from, but they were.
I saw the movie Outbreak. That's him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And again, very skilled writer. Okay. But, as you know, and some of our audience will not know, writing, especially fiction, really comprises several things at the same time. Okay. It's not just, it's plotting. Yes. Very important. Character development, character change, background, scenery, giving you the flavor. It's all there. It's all part of the same thing. It's, a few years ago, I mentioned to somebody that now, because of computers, everybody who can type thinks he can write. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And the thing is, but that's one of the reasons why not everybody does write, because it actually seems really easy until you sit down and try to do it. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have, where someone says, I'd really like to write a book. Can you help me in any way? And I say, yes, make an outline.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? Because even in fiction, you can make an outline. Most people don't.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You outline?
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly my first few books, I definitely outlined a lot. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm a high school teacher. So a lot of times now I'll start my outlines during final exam, the 2 weeks of final exams, as I'm walking up and down the aisles, just kind of supervising while they're all doing their exams. I have a notepad and I'm writing out outlines that I want to start once my summer holidays start.
That's funny. Well, and the good thing about that is you're not about to sit down and face a blank page and not know what to do. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but a lot of writers have talked about what they do is they stop writing when they're in the middle of a page or in the middle of some development, right? So that when they come back, it's not like the old days where there's a blank page in the typewriter, but when they come back to the page in the book on the computer screen, on the monitor screen, they know exactly where they're starting, right? And so, they may hit a dead spot somewhere else along the way, but it's not when they sit down at the beginning, because that's extraordinarily frustrating, and that, is the whole discussion of writer's block and all that crap. But by the way, a book to recommend to you on writing, Stephen King wrote a book on writing. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Have you read it?
No, I haven't read it, but I've seen it.
Yeah, really, it's in my trunk. I'd loan it to you, but you're not here. And it's also to some degree memoir, but it's just really, really good. And it's not like it's going to teach anybody how to write, but it will give you some ideas for those who don't. It's just really well done. And I'm not a big Stephen King fiction fan because I don't like to be scared on purpose. Okay. I have enough in life that scares me by accident, but I'd recommend the book. Anyway, but a lot of them talk about stopping like in the middle so they can come back. And you have kind of accomplished that by what you're doing by outlining while you're proctoring exams. So that when you sit down, you already know what you're doing. And that's the advantage one of the advantages, but not the only one, of an outline.
Yeah. So also what I do when I'm writing, and then if I know that, okay, it's getting late, I'm done, I'll finish my scene, and then I'll write underneath about 3 or 4 lines of what I want the next scene to look like, what I want to happen in the next scene, so that, like you said, when you sit down the next day, you open it up and it's right there. Oh, okay, this is what I want. Okay, start here. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about Finders Keepers. Without giving it away, because it's just going on sale in 2 days. By the way, before I let you answer that question, let me also indicate to our audience that it's available for pre-order now, right?
It is, yeah. Pre-order on Amazon. The ebook only, just the ebook. Yeah, the paperback will come out usually about a week after the ebook, but it's not available for pre-order now.
Okay, so if you want the ebook, don't leave what you're watching or hearing, but as soon as we're done, get your computer over there to Amazon.com. Okay, go ahead. Talk about Finders Keepers.
Yeah, so Finders Keepers, it's funny how the whole idea came up for this because I talk a lot with my family doctor. Like I'll go for a checkup and we'll just sit and chat and we talk about death. We talk about, how would you kill someone, get away with it? And, it's pretty scary stuff that if strangers ever listened in on our conversation, they'd be like, oh my gosh, who are these guys? But, we're often talking about, yeah. And so anyways, he was telling me this case he had heard about from an American heiress back in the 70s and 80s. Apparently her second husband had attempted to kill her with a certain method. I don't know if I should say it because it might give it away. Certain method. So when I got home that day, I looked up that case and, I read over it all and I just thought it was fascinating investigation and a fascinating story. So I kind of stole that idea, I guess, and used it in Finders Keepers. So Finders Keepers basically is a Calvin Waters novel. The main plot, is an investigation into escorts who are being murdered in Vegas. So there's a serial killer murdering escorts, and the Vegas police are kind of at a dead end. And so they're, Calvin has these two detective friends he always works with. So they asked Calvin if he would help them investigate. And so he's kind of drawn back into the world he had left behind, or that he thought he had left behind, the red light district of Vegas and the whole underworld that exists in Vegas. So he's kind of drawn back into that place to investigate. So that's kind of one plot, that investigation. And the other plot is kind of an ongoing thing where there's a group of hired hitmen who are out for Calvin. So in book one, Dead Man's Hand, there's a hitman hired to kill Calvin. He doesn't. He gets his leg blown off by Calvin. And so in the next book, he returns to try to kill Calvin. Calvin kills him. And now in this book, the hitman's best friend hears about Calvin killing him. So now he's coming out to avenge his friend's death. So there's kind of a double plot going on there with the hired hitman on one side, and then the murdered escorts investigation on the other side. So that is basically Finders Keepers in a nutshell. It's another police procedure or crime fiction, mystery, thriller, suspense, whatever genre you want to call it. It can kind of be tied up into any of those. And this was a lot of fun. Someone says, so which is your favorite book? And you know what? The cliche is the next one, this one, like the next one I'm working on is my favorite one. So
the cliche I thought you were going to refer to was, that's like picking your favorite child.
Oh, I can do that depending on the day, for sure. Depending on their behavior and their attitude that day. Usually the dog is usually my favorite.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's funny. But no, you're right. It's like, it's you're writing mostly in the same or similar genre. So that's one thing. But especially if you're writing in different ones, it's hard. And even the same one, they are not only different in terms of what the books are, but where you were in your life when you wrote them. Okay, that makes a big difference in how you feel about what you've written. And I'm obviously pleased that you agree. So, are you working on the next one yet? I know it's a little early.
Not yet. Usually, once I have a book published, I'll kind of throw out a survey to my readers on social media and on my website, and what are you guys interested in seeing? Do you want another Calvin Waters? Because I always have 2 or 3 ideas, like an idea for each of them, where I would want them to go next, type thing. So I kind of throw it out there to the readers. Sometimes it's in my mind, I know what I want, but I throw it out there anyways to see if they can persuade me to change it. But I'll ask them, do you want Calvin? Do you want Charlene? Do you want them together? Do you want something totally new? But I usually have a couple of ideas where I want each one of them to go. So
that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
That method of doing it, okay.
I mean, they're the ones buying my books, right? So they should kind of get a say in what they want to read. So yeah.
And no, but not only that, but I mean, I know this is not your purpose, but it's, I always think of business, and it's also, it's kind of a pre-sale of the books because they have had a hand in it.
Right.
By the way, I wanted to mention 2 extraneous things. One is the reason I'm wearing a tie was not just for our discussion, but because I just finished work. Okay. When we started, and I wear a tie because it makes people open their door more easily. And for our American audience in particular, who have probably been noticing Luke when he says the word out, he's Canadian.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to school at RIT in Rochester, New York, and so I was dating a girl in college there, and every time I'd go over to her parents' house, they'd always say out, say about, say out. They always want me to say something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not making fun. It was just something that I had noticed, But it's,
Oh, I'm sure as soon as I get back on social media, everyone will talk to me and say, "You sound weird. You sound weird."
you sound Canadian. I'm sorry, what's the name of the famous, was it Molson's? The famous beer up there?
Yeah, Molson. Yeah, they own the Montreal Canadian hockey team. Yeah, the Molsons. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think that's the one that has the. I'm not trying to give them an ad. I don't drink, but what is it? Molson's? It's Canadian for beer. Is that what their slogan used to be?
Yeah. Wow, that's good. It's good that American knows that.
Okay, all right. Hold on here. All right, folks. I'm going to impress him with something else. Ready? Okay. Ready? Okay. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Diefenbaker, Pearson, Trudeau ×2, Kim Campbell,
Wow.
Mulrooney.
Wow.
I think that's probably all I can do at the moment.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
That's impressive.
But for those who don't know, those were Canadian prime ministers.
There you go. Yeah, that's impressive.
Just real quick, because we're over time now, and I know you've got other things to do in your life, like go to sleep and prepare for work tomorrow. But
well, I was going to say next time, like I'm a father with young kids. This is almost past my bedtime. Next time we do it.
Yeah, it's now it's about 10:07 your time. So
yeah,
anyway,
that's right.
The thing now, what was I going to say?
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. We were talking about accents and so forth. Now I forgot.
The prime ministers. You mentioned the prime
ministers. The thing is, it's a weird thing. I can do the president of the United States in order, without really thinking about it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can obviously know a lot of. Oh, I remember. I was going to tell you the story about Diefenbaker and Kennedy.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, but anyway, and by the way, again, for those who don't know, there is an airport in Canada named after Diefenbaker. Although I couldn't tell you for my life where it is. Where is that airport?
Yeah, I don't even know either.
Oh, really? Okay. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was a Diefenbaker airport. Okay. Anyway, when Jack Kennedy and Diefenbaker were in office around the same time in the 1960s, and someone said that they had heard, this was not publicized at the time because in those days they didn't speak like this in public, but he said someone accused Jack Kennedy of calling Diefenbaker a son of a bitch in the recent past. And Kennedy said, actually, that's not possible. He says, at that point, I hadn't met Diefenbaker, so I didn't know what a son of a bitch he really was. Apparently, they didn't get along.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't that funny? All right. Well, listen, we'll kind of end on that note. And Luke, thank you. I hope the book sells 1 million copies, or at least more than 12 a year. And that's like a jazz riff coming back, right?
There you go.
But I hope it does very well. I'm thrilled for you that it's coming out in 2 days as an ebook and about another week as a is it paperback?
Ebook on Friday, and then a week later paperback, and then probably a week after that the audiobook.
Okay, terrific. So whatever type of edition you want, it's Finders Keepers, and Amazon.com is probably the easiest place to get it. Luke Murphy's been our guest, and while you're there, take a look at his earlier books because he's written a number of them, and you may want to also pick those up because it'll give you a flavor for the characters. Okay?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I appreciate every time you take the time to host me on your show. It's always a pleasure.
Mine too. And first off, it's just fun talking to you. And of course, the subject matter we're talking about is fun for me as well. And you're obviously very engaging. And at the risk of sounding like an egotist, it's always good to help a fellow author, especially one who's more successful than I am. All right. Luke, be well.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Take care, man.
Take care, Jeff. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.